Welcome to the program From Aunt Jemima to Clair Huxtable, Images of Black Women in the Media. This is a public service presented by the Boston chapter of Links Incorporated. The Links Incorporated is a civic organization of about 8,000 predominantly black women in 250 chapters in the U.S., the Caribbean, and Germany. The local chapter was founded in 1950, and like all chapters, works in four facet areas. These facets are freedom in the arts, services to youth, national trends and services, and international trends and services. Today's program touches on national trends and services to youth. The program took about 2 years to conceptualize and plan. We hope you leave here with heightened consciousness about how blacks in general and black women in particular are treated in the media. We also hope you use this knowledge in helping young people approach the media with critical eyes. Thank you. Now, Dr. Ann Ashmore Hudson.
Welcome. As Lorraine has already said, this forum is an expression of our concern about the images of women in the media, and in particular, the images of African American women. It is our way of sharing that concern with you as a larger audience and exploring the impact of these images on all of our lives. Caricature has always been used by a dominant culture to control less dominant cultures. For example, in 18th century Europe, as Jewish people became more prominent in the running of financial institutions, newspapers and pamphlets of the day began to depict them in cartoons as misers and Shylocks, and in doing so gave rise to anti-Semitic stereotypes. Of course, there are many other stereotypes. The mafioso Italian, the hot Spanish lover, the sing-song talking Charlie Chan, the tobacco-chewing Southern redneck. Some stereotypes are positive. Recently, the characterization of Asians as studious and hardworking has replaced a World War II stereotype of the shifty-eyed Japanese who could not be trusted. But even positive stereotypes have the disadvantage of denying the reality of diversity within a group of people. Most often, it is the purpose of stereotype to set people apart, to say that the stereotyped person is not only different, but different in such a way that she deserves whatever unkindness befalls her. It is the danger of stereotype that it can become so much a part of our social and media experience that we cannot distinguish between stereotype and reality, between real people and stereotypes of real people. In addition, stereotype denies the reality of shared human experiences: birth, love, aging, death, experiences that we all share and that bind us to each other, no matter our gender, race, or ethnicity. This evening, we will examine the caricatures of one group, that of African American women. However, it is important to realize that the images of African American men have received the same treatment. The video, From Aunt Jemima to Attorney Clair Huxtable, presents a brief history of how African American women have been stereotyped on film and on television, and it identifies for us some of the characterizations shown through the years. We ask you to join us in viewing these images with a critical eye. After the film, we will have a brief responsive statement from each of our distinguished panelists, and Deborah Prothos-Stiff will moderate a broader discussion among the panelists and the audience. We'll now have the video.
before Al Jolson belted out the hit song Mammy on stage in minstrel shows in the 1920s, the role of the black mammy had been institutionalized through advertising as one of the most enduring images of black women. The country's most famous mammy, Aunt Jemima, appeared on her first pancake box more than 100 years ago. It's an image that survives today. The earliest Hollywood stereotypes of black women, the sinful and sultry sex siren, the bossy sapphire, and the devoted and subservient mammy, have become part of America's consciousness.
I knew she was trouble. I should have known it when I met her.
And in recent years have been updated and joined by the equally stereotypical image of the welfare mother, as seen in Baby's Kids, and the career superwoman of The Cosby Show. Film historian Dr. Elizabeth Hadley Friedberg believes Hollywood's motives are not innocent.
The film for people of color in this country has never been strictly entertainment. I believe that the film has been used to keep certain groups in their place. And we're talking about black women, and I believe that it's used to keep black women in their place and to reinforce the attitudes of mainstream United States. And the preconceived notions of what black women are about and who they are reinforced in these images on the screen.
Sadly, the depictions of black women in the popular media have not only reinforced perceptions and prejudices of white Americans, but they have also shaped the negative images blacks may have of themselves, according to psychiatrist Dr. Alvin Poussant.
It's a kind of entrenched racism, frankly, and it sold and it played to the stereotypes that white people had of black people. It was also keeping black people in their place. I mean, if they gave them other roles that were more important or serious, it would be elevating them in terms of status to a level of equality with whites. I think it was necessary for whites to constantly see black people as inferior and as servants to them. It was flattering to them to see them in those kinds of roles.
I don't know if I can stretch one small chicken, but as long as the water's running, we'll have soup enough.
The black actress most often associated with the role of Mammy was Hattie McDaniel. She played the kerchiefed, big-eyed mama in more than 20 films in the 30s. Ironically, Hollywood rewarded her with a Best Supporting Actress Oscar in 1939 for her characterization of a mammy in Gone with the Wind. She was the first African-American actress to receive such an honor. McDaniel said she'd rather play a maid than be one.
Even black women who were working as maids were not mammies, right? They were frequently very responsible, cared about their families. This was their job. And then they came home and they took care of their children and so on. Frequently that side of the mammy image is never presented. She's never presented as someone who has a family and a life of her own, right? So you don't, it's not really an examination anyway of black life. It's a depiction of a stereotype that whites have of a black person or individual, in fact, who they want to present as being more loyal to them than to their own black family, which is a distortion and a lie.
Some of the most popular Hollywood films of the 40s were those with all-black casts, usually comedies or musical reviews, like 1943's Stormy Weather, starring one-time Cotton Club chorus girl Lena Horne and Bill Robinson. Hollywood often attempted to cast Horne as a loose woman, but her class and sophistication always shone through. Horne was one of the first black performers able to survive in Hollywood, despite turning down many parts she considered demeaning to African Americans.
Ain't that something? Ain't that something to shout about?
The White Citizens Council, organized in the mid-50s, advocated a new means of controlling Southern Negroes, economic reprisal. Ironically, the Negroes borrowed this concept and used it to score their first spectacular breakthrough. That was in Montgomery, Alabama.
In the 50s, as women like Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer were being applauded in the black community for their courageous roles in the civil rights movement, Hollywood was applauding Dorothy Dandridge for her roles in Porgy and Bess and Carmen Jones. In both, Dandridge played the sinful sex siren, a woman who used her sexual appeal to her advantage and usually for the destruction of others. Dandridge received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress in Carmen Jones, the first time a black actress had been nominated.
Hollywood didn't know what to do with her. She won accolades from all over the world, and so that led one of the Hollywood studios to give her a contract, which was unheard of, which was to pay her something like $75,000 for each film. And here she had this contract, she had the acting abilities, and Hollywood was afraid to deal with her.
Newfound political power in the black community in the 60s was the impetus behind an NAACP boycott of advertisers on CBS, leading to the demise of TV's Amos and Andy, a carryover from a radio program in which Kingfish's wife, Sapphire, perpetuated the image of the bossy, sassy, overpowering, and emasculating black woman.
Well, all I've got to say, George, is that it looks mighty suspicious to me. But we won't say anything more about it. I'm warning you, though, if anything else like this happens, it'll be the sorriest day of your life.
The Sapphire role is the character who is a woman who henpecks her husband, criticizes her men constantly, and loud, boisterous, really obnoxious type woman character, and that's the Sapphire. And so that is the character that we were given weekly on television in the 1950s. In Amos and Andy, and also the show called Beulah, and which they ran for a long time. And then again, we see it in shows such as What's Happening in the 70s.
Give me your love.
Blaxploitation and sexploitation films of the 70s sent a mixed message. While portraying black men as macho types, these same films usually depicted black women as junkies and whores. Coffee, starring Pam Grier, was pushed by Hollywood as the violent super bitch, right at the height of the white-led women's liberation movement.
In fact, that was an image that people saw as one that was maybe loosening up in some way, but that was the other side of the stereotype, that if you weren't a mammy, you were rather loose and quick and easy with the morals, which is the sexualized image of the black woman.
Many of these early stereotypes of black women seem obvious to us now, but we must learn to recognize the new and improved stereotypical images seen in the movies, on television, and in music videos.
Even now, you can see upgrading of those images. On some of the sitcoms, you see a lot of those styles of the overweight black woman, which they select for these roles, playing a kind of mammy, smart-talking, hand-on-a-hip style that's reminiscent of those old types of images that they feel will sell, and usually that frequently white producers feel will sell to the white American public as images of black women and the way that they behave. And this image, of course, is not usually a dignified one. It's in fact demeaning.
In recent years, Hollywood has given the movie-going public a new kind of movie, one produced and directed by an African American or with a black in a starring role. But sometimes the result is just as damaging to the image of black women.
You show is ugly.
Spielberg's film version of Alice Walker's novel The Color Purple emphasized black women as victims. Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It appears to be about a sexually liberated female, but having sex appears to be her only concern. In Harlem Nights, Della Reese, as a brothel madam, fights it out with Eddie Murphy. And Murphy's Boomerang is thought to be a romantic comedy, with Murphy as the Cary Grant-like leading man. But Friedberg says that's missing the point.
God, Marcus, I was so tense when I got off the plane, but you really relaxed me.
Many of my students have suggested that this is a new type film because you have brainy women and they're business executives and so forth. And what I have pointed out is when you strip away the glitter and the gold, you have at the core a black woman who is still prone.
Network TV can't seem to get enough of sitcoms starring blacks, but many are shocked at the way African Americans are depicted. Black writers are few and far between on the staffs of many of these black-oriented movies and sitcoms, but even when most of the writers and producer are black, as is the case on In Living Color, racist images are still promoted, observes Poussaint.
If you think of some of the images of black women presented on In Living Color, right? It's dirty, loud talking, gossipy, filthy mouth, always talking, got sex on the brain, are stereotypes. But I think they think that they're making fun of the stereotypes. I think a lot of people watching it are just seeing the stereotypes, you know. And those shows, that show like that is also very popular among whites, which then in turn is reinforcing stereotypes that they have of women in the black community.
Hey, Claire, they're here.
Interestingly, Dr. Poussaint cautions that while The Cosby Show was overwhelmingly successful in changing attitudes about the black family, Clair Huxtable's character as the mom with it all together is another kind of stereotype.
Black women have to perhaps guard against people presenting them as superwomen with no problems, doing everything, taking care of everything, and continuing to take care of everything. But I think that she has to be presented, you know, in balance. Now, on The Cosby Show, Clair Huxtable never did any housework. She was always looking very, very attractive and stylish, and had time to do the groceries, and also was a law partner in a top law firm, very seldom brought any work home, was always home on weekend with the kids and so on. Well, that's not real.
So where's the danger? It's all just fun, you might think. A recent study by the Nielsen Company showed that blacks watch TV more than any other racial group, averaging 70 hours a week, compared with 47 hours for non-black households. Psychotherapist Valerie Proctor-Green sees danger in those statistics.
Oftentimes because parents aren't around to supervise or to limit, they watch a lot of TV, and TV becomes this medium for what's normal or for what's glamorous or what's desirable. And from that, they decide how to define themselves or how they would like to define themselves. And racism can have a very devastating effect on self-esteem if that strong sense of racial identity is not instilled. With these images in the media, it's very, very difficult to develop that strong sense of identity, almost impossible for some children.
Proctor-Green is concerned about African American women and men patterning their behavior on what they see in music videos, in which women appear to be eager to have sex and are usually displaying subservient behavior. In her practice, Proctor-Green has noticed many females seem to act out stereotypes that appear in the media.
It could be a situation of the oppressed internalizing the teachings of the oppressor, where circumstances make us learn to cope a certain way, and also images constantly bombarding us with certain views or definitions of ourselves. We internalize that.
Poussaint believes this media brainwashing affects how black men see black women, too.
I think that's part of the problem, in fact, with black males and black females interrelating, because frequently they may be operating without knowing it from stereotypes imposed on them via the media. We become victims of the stereotypes as well, and that we have to do some purging of our own minds as well as white society about how these images have affected us in our personal lives.
We're talking about it on the next Oprah.
There are some positive images of African American women on TV. NBC's A Different World shows the diversity of African American women seeking a good education and careers. On Fox, Rock's wife is a nurse. helping her husband and family get ahead on pride and without welfare. And ABC News anchor Carol Simpson made great strides in debunking myths about the intelligence of black women when she ably moderated a presidential debate, probing and questioning three white men who sought the most powerful job in the world. We must take the first step toward unlocking our minds by challenging stereotypical and negative images of ourselves with which a white-dominated media would continue to subjugate us for years to come. Free your mind!
Well, some of you, if you're looking at your program, might notice that I am not Deborah Proto-Stiff. I noticed that myself. When they told me that her plane was going to be 2 hours late and that I was her backup. So, what do you think? Thank you. I like this group. Well, I hope that gave you some provocative thought that we can start off with. And I'm willing to start off with a few questions before I do that, I'm sorry. I have to introduce the panel. Okay. This isn't my part. All right. We have with us this afternoon, first on my left, is Elaine Pinderhughes. She is a professor of social work at Boston College Graduate School of Social Work, where she is chair of the clinical sequence. In addition to her private practice and work in diversity awareness, she is the author of the award-winning book, Understanding Race, Ethnicity, and Power, The Key to Efficacy in Clinical Practice. Recently, she was a Lucille Austin Fellow at Columbia University. Next to Professor Pinderhughes is Elizabeth Hadley Freidberg, who is an assistant professor of African American Studies at Northeastern University, where she teaches and writes about Black theater, film, and feminism. A Fulbright lecturer at Kenyatta University and the Goff Institute in Nairobi, Kenya, Dr. Hadley Freidberg is currently completing a book entitled Bessie Coleman, The Brown-Skinned Ladybird. Next to Dr. Freidberg is Betty Ann Williams, who is the bureau editor for USA Today. She works as an assignment editor on the national staff of USA Today. In addition, she has served as planning editor and Washington World editor at the newspaper, which boasts the largest readership and second largest circulation in the United States. Ms. Williams served as president of the Washington Press Club prior to its merger with the Washington Press Club, prior to its merger with the National Press Club. Recently, she was a fellow at the John Shorenstein Barone Center on the Press, Politics, and Public Policy at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One I'd just like to start off with is, I want to ask our panelists. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. They give a speech first. I think I'm anxious to make my... You think I'm anxious? I think I have a question to ask. Yes, I apologize. We will have a presentation from each of our guests first, and then we will have questions.
Everyone in this audience had some reaction to the images of African American women on screen that were just shown. What was yours? Do you think these images cause any harm to African American women or to you personally? I say they may and they do, and I will illustrate why from an example in my own experience. True, this experience is not from the media. Media as we know it was not around in those long ago days when I was growing up. But there was Aunt Jemima. And she wasn't on the pancake box, as I remember, but on the flour sack. And I did not like her. I didn't know why, but it was very clear that that image of that plump, smiling Negro lady with the bandana wrapped around her head meant me no good and often caused me to experience some very unpleasant feelings. Recognizing that she was Negro, as was I, and feeling the unpleasant responses that her image mobilized in me caused real confusion for me. I found myself wanting to dissociate myself from her, to see myself as very different from her, and totally unconnected to her. At the same time, I also realized that her appearance, even if not its symbolism, resembled closely that of a dear relative, a realization that only compounded my discomfort and confusion. It was only much later that I came to understand what was bothering me was in the meaning of this image, that of the mammy, whom white people saw as the happy servant, eager to please, enjoying her role, and adoring her mistress or master or employer. It was only later that I realized that it was part and parcel of racism, embodying the servile, oppressed status of black people, my people, whom the larger society saw as happy and contented with the relatively powerless, disenfranchised roles we were trapped in. I knew such a meaning for this image was a lie, for I could think of no colored people, that's what we were called in those days, who found that image anything but distressing and embarrassing. Many years later, therefore, a white colleague, quite in contrast to my own reaction to this stereotypical image, responded very differently. It happened in a workshop for mental health professionals on developing diversity awareness and cultural sensitivity. We were processing our experiences concerning racial identity and examining their meaning. This young male psychologist who had grown up in the Midwest stated with great conviction that he had never known any black people. He was therefore certain that he could not possibly harbor any racial prejudice. And as if to prove his freedom from racial bias, he then added with great feeling, how I loved Aunt Jemima on the pancake box. And why was this white man so enamored of this Negro mammy? He imagined, said he, that this fat, pleasant woman was warm and nurturing, the exact opposite, to use his words, of his own cold, rejecting mother. Aunt Jemima would have loved him and assured him of that acceptance that he so longed for. So what brought me discomfort and confusion brought him a sense of nurturance and security. And this difference in the meaning of Aunt Jemima to each of us is one of the reasons why these images of African American women persist. While Aunt Jemima comforted and nurtured my white colleague, listen to what Aunt Jemima did to me. I am never, even today, able to respond freely in my relationships with whites when there's an expectation that I serve them or nurture them in some way. Even when this is a part of my job and my role as clinician, educator, colleague, or friend, I have to deal with the garbage of Aunt Jemima. It is absolutely essential that I spend extra time and energy deciding whether I want to take on this nurturing, supportive role to white folks. Managing appropriately any resentment I happen to feel, any sense I may have that this task, this required activity, which I feel called upon to take, will cause me to feel I'm reinforcing the mammy stereotype. Not a rational response. This resentment is a trigger reaction, and I must keep firmly under control my internalized computer program that says no, no, to protect me from colluding in being an Aunt Jemima. It is very important that I be able to engage in this sorting out process in my mind and make a rational decision about how I will behave. For if I'm going to reach a particular goal which I've set as a clinician, educator, colleague, or friend, I cannot allow my automatic response to a perceived invitation to be a mammy to cause me to fail, because my self-respect demands rejection of the mammy role. At the same time, my sense of myself impels me to never accept a caretaking, nurturing role with whites if it forces me to experience a sense of powerlessness or disrespect. So I've had to learn to see reality clearly, to process carefully the situation I'm in, to manage my negative feelings well, and exercise sound judgment in deciding how to behave so as not to undermine any goals that I've set. I feel certain that most of you here this evening who are so-called older persons have felt called upon to behave similarly each and every day, whether you are aware of it or not. Yes, Aunt Jemima's image and the other images too have been updated. But in my mind, the meaning is still very powerful. And I am sure that you, like I, have accepted this need for critical thinking, being able to process what's happening to you, as the price of being African American. And along with it, also the risk of becoming rigid and joyless in our determination to avoid collusion with these stereotypes. Over the years, I have seen that struggle as both a burden and a challenge. I am grateful for the strength to transcend the entrapment which these dynamics present. But as a child, I really could not deal with that confusion and the unpleasant responses that Aunt Jemima and the other negative stereotypes aroused. I wanted them to go away. I compartmentalized them. I tried not to think about them. But I was also a child who had a great deal of support to see African American people and their culture in positive ways, who had models of family, teachers, and friends who were struggling to provide their own definitions for themselves, living their lives with dignity, including those who worked as maids, chauffeurs, and cooks. And thus I learned to cope as many of you have. But if children have no such buffers, no help to understand the distortions implicit in these stereotypical media images, no models that can help them to nullify them, as is the case for far too many African American children today, they have no alternative but to view these images, prevalent as they are in TV and Hollywood film, and in other media too, as meaning that this is how black females should behave and be treated. These children, our children, must have help to understand the simplistic caricature-like unreal nature of these images and to develop the critical thinking and self-management competencies that will help them cope. Not only with these stereotypical images, but with the purposes they serve. But what causes us confusion, pain, and other destructive responses brings aid and comfort to those who create these images. Experts tell us, and research shows, that African Americans consume far greater cognitive and emotional energy than do whites in dealing with their issues related to their identity. Maybe I should repeat that. That African Americans consume far greater cognitive and emotional energy than do whites in dealing with issues connected with their identity. Until very recently, few people gave much thought to these issues. And it's illustrated in an encounter I had just the other day with a friend. I was telling her about this program, and she said, yes, negative images of African American women. And I began to talk about some of the images, and I mentioned Sapphire, and she said, she got a little excited, and she said, yeah, like what Red Fox used to do. Remember that woman on Red Fox? And I said, and then I talked about some of the sexual images, and she got even angrier. And she talked about, yeah, I saw that in living color. And then I said, well, you know, why? And then she said, but black men make some of these videos. And I said, well, what do you think about that? And by then she was screaming. And she said, what do they care about us? So we've been asleep, perhaps. While some few have spoken out, including some of our other speakers today, so far it's been too few to matter. In my mind, we will not successfully challenge these images or teach our children to cope until we understand several things. The effect on us and on our children that TV is their textbook, how the larger society views them, and that these images are part of American culture. That we pay a price whether we internalize these images or whether we struggle against them. And two, we can't help our children cope unless we understand the purpose of these images. And in understanding the purpose, we have to look at what stereotypes are. They're prejudgments of another person without checking out their accuracy. They're projections of unwanted, disavowed parts of the self. And the purpose of stereotypes, ladies and gentlemen, is to relieve anxiety and reduce tension in the person who holds the stereotype, as, for example, the young psychologist that I just mentioned. Thus, these stereotypes do not just amuse and titillate, but provide dominant society with a way to feel less anxious and tense. Our being psychological stabilizers for them enables them to feel more entitled, more competent, more superior, and more powerful. So why would white directors and producers give African American people roles that would challenge the stereotypes if, as Dr. Poussin has just said, it would elevate African Americans to roles of equality? As one white commentator, Studs Terkel, recently declared, this is hard to do. By this he meant giving up some power and privilege. With our recognition of these will our recognition of these dynamics supply the much needed motivation to speak out and challenge these images? Again, I ask, what were your responses to these images? And I would also ask you now, what are you going to do about them? Thank you.
The images that we've just seen on the screen, the images of black women are not new. On the contrary, they are derivatives from the 19th century minstrel stage, where initially white men in blackface caricatured black men. So that when black people became professional entertainers during the mid-19th century, they were caricatures of the caricature. Indeed, the Mammy image appears on screen in 1915 in Birth of a Nation, played by a white man in blackface, culminating in Hattie Mcdaniel receiving an Academy Award in 1939 for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, a film for which they did not bother to give her a name other than Mammy. Mammy has become a mainstay in Hollywood films, as evidenced in Whoopi Goldberg, 52 years later, becoming the second African-American woman to receive an Academy Award in the history of the Oscars, as supporting actress in Ghost, for a role in which she manifests the requisite characteristics, minus the excessive weight and head rag, of Mammy, risking her life for the salvation of the white folks, Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze. The Aunt Jemima character
we should know, was founded in the early 1890s by a white man who hired Nancy Green, a black woman, to dress in costume and flip pancakes at the 1893 World Fair. That's the same World Fair where women such as Ida B. Wells Barnett and other club women tried to gain entry into the exhibit just as spectators. I would like to give you another aside. Gone with the Wind. I think it's important to note that when Russia, the new Russia, opened its doors a couple of years ago to the West, the first film that was taken there was Gone with the Wind. Tickets were sold out 6 months in advance. These images are buttressed by novels. For example, Fannie Hurst, a white woman. Her best-selling novel of 1932 was Imitation of Life. It became a successful film in 1934, and it was remade in 1959 during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. The Sexual Temptress appears on screen with Nina Mae McKinney in 1929, Hallelujah. It is very important to recognize here that while we talk about the two images most prevalent of black women being the mammy and the sexual siren or prostitute or harlot, that the prototype for the temptress appears on screen in 1929 because the mammy was considered sexless, undesirable. So that when in 1929, when we received the image of the temptress as visually sexually desirable, she is morally undesirable, so remains a marginal character. While at the same time, both characters, or both people in the history of the United States, were being exploited by white males. Dorothy Dandridge was cast in such roles in the 1950s. Pam Grier took this sassy mouth. Now we have a combination of the sapphire with the sexual image, and Pam Grier took the sassy mouth to the height of the super bitch image. Also, I might add, at a time when the Moynihan Report, after the Moynihan Report of 1964, had already described black women as being matriarchs who emasculated their men, Pam Grier on screen castrated a male, placed the genitals in a jar, and sent them as a warning to another man. This was on screen, visually. Today we see this character in music videos. Some people would like to attribute this image only to rap videos. That's not true. It's to the majority of music videos, and we have to look at all of them. She is not new. She's changed her clothes, she wears designer fashions, and continues to reinforce the preconceived notions of mainstream United States regarding the image and function of the black woman. Since her forced immigration to the New World, the black woman's position has been prone, first as the progenitor of a free labor force, then often as the raped progenitor of the master's children, and now as the sex toy for all men. The sexless mammy and the foul-mouthed, sex-crazed sapphire are related in that they are both undesirable women. While the mammy is physically undesirable, the temptress with sapphire characteristics remains morally undesirable. The dichotomy prevails because no one would rape or exploit a verbally emasculating woman. She only gets what she asks for. It is significant to note that we cannot divest ourselves of this negative images as long as they are continually buttressed by United States popular culture as represented in novels, theater, films, cartoons, radio and television shows, and the ever-rising popular memorabilia, advertisements, and music videos. We can also no longer sit back and respond as victims. We have to accept the responsibility for altering these images. When we write a letter to our television stations, every one letter is worth 1,000. If we do not demand a change in the market, we will not get a change. Thank you very much.
Some of the same kinds of stereotypes that you see of African American women and African Americans in general in the mass media find their way into the news media as well. And please, let's not underestimate that. News is supposed to be different. It's supposed to be neutral and objective. It's supposed to be fair and balanced. And that's why when stereotypes find their way into news, they're particularly insidious and dangerous. Often, African American women in the news media are either invisible, or if they're shown at all, they're shown as powerless or as victims. We're here to make an appeal in the same kind of way that they are, that you take control of the images that are shown you in the news media, and we'll talk about how that can be done. News is supposed to represent reality. It's supposed to describe the place of the players that you see in society. It's an educator for good or for ill, and it's time that we realize that we can determine how the outcome comes out. We have power, and we have to choose to exercise it in the same manner that you just talked about. A letter to a news director or to a newspaper has more impact than you would realize. There are two areas that we can affect so that we have more control over our images. African American women aren't visible because African American women are not part of the process of deciding what is news. There are only there are about 1,500 newspapers in the United States, but there are only 4 African American women who are publishers of daily newspapers. Only 10% of the people who are gathering news for daily newspapers are minority, and that means Hispanics as well as African Americans and Asians and Native Americans. That's everybody, so you know that African American women are underrepresented there. And if you think about the news correspondents who present the news to you, how many come to mind who are African American women? I can come up with 3 or 4. The only regular presenter of the news among African American women is Carol Simpson of ABC. In broadcast newsrooms and newspapers and magazines as well, African American women are not in control. African American men are also not in control. It's rare for African Americans to run a news operation and choose the images that are presented to you. So we don't control the definition, the selection, the preparation, or the presentation of the news. Another reason for our low visibility is that African American women are still fighting to get our rightful place in society. A good way to monitor progress is to look at how many elected officials we've managed to put in office. We now have 1 African American woman senator, the first ever. There are 47 women in the House of Representatives, but only 7 of them are African American women. So when we work on those two things, affecting who puts out the news and affecting who would be considered legitimate newsmakers, we can control our images. We can get rid of this problem. Thank you. Thank you.
We are now ready for questions. There are 2 microphones on the floor, one here and one there. And if you have a question, please start lining up. No? Yes? Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yes, I have a...
Please, first, will you identify yourself so we will know who you are as well?
Thank you. My name is Bill Singleton. I'm publisher of Black History magazine. I believe that Mrs. Freeberg and many other people have a copy. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank
and
you.
I may have not been dressed for the occasion, but I'm here nonetheless, and I'm happy. I would like to support what you're saying. There are 11,000 magazines in the country. There are 30 black national magazines in the country. There is a disparity here. And if you want control, support those organizations and magazines that come out that tell you who Ida B. Wells is. Okay.
No.
I'll be very free. I'm sorry.
Well, we do want your question.
Yeah, my question would be, how do you think that we can develop the financial resources available to support the information tools that we have? How can we best develop those resources so that people like me and many other people, women from a lot of different parts of the country and men of a lot of different parts of the country can grow with these magazines? I want to direct that to first Mrs. Williams and then Mrs. Friedberg.
There is definitely a need for more collaboration among African Americans. We, as individuals, often do very well for ourselves, but we don't necessarily share that good fortune with one another as we might. I also believe that African Americans in general are less interested in news-type product than they should be. I'm not sure if there is some fear of approaching the media because we aren't accustomed to doing it, or just general disinterest, or a lack of knowledge of the amount of money one can make in a news operation. Well, they're very good investments if you can put a good package together.
Well, what I get is they say to me, you don't have the type.
I really appreciate it, but we have a limited amount of time. Stephanie Stokes-Oliver is here with us, and we have to share a little bit more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A question here. Yes. Would you identify yourself, please?
Yeah. I'm Callie Crossley, and I produce for 2020, so I wanted to speak to the news
yes, you
images
do.
and the problem. This is working towards solutions that we can share here, and that the letter writing is very, very important. We as a community do not respond to programs. We just do not. And then we don't respond consistently. When images change, it's because it's not only that they got a letter this month, they got it the next month and the month after that, and the phone calls keep coming, and you got to know who to call. So take a moment to find out exactly who is the correct person. You know, if you're mad about Cosby, don't call my boss. He's not going to respond. You know what I'm saying? So if you know that, then that's very important, and I just wanted to underscore that because we just don't hear from the community, and give you a positive example. On my network, on Primetime Live, did a version of a story about Detroit, and black people in Detroit did not like it. And they got on a plane, and they went to New York to express it. Okay? And they met with the vice president of news at ABC. So there is change, there is way, you know, but you got to be heard, and you got to make it clear that you mean for those images to change. So write, call too, but writing is very important.
Callie, I want to ask. I want to just ask a question on that myself, if I may. And I'm wondering if you think that's because having not been empowered before, having spoken and not been heard, do you think that we have a sort of habit of not expecting to be heard, not expecting a response, and sort of reinforcing that by not doing it?
I think it's two things. I think we don't expect to be heard, but I also think it seems so big. And you're sitting at home and you're watching the news and you think, nothing's going to change if I write a little letter. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to change. But
you're telling us that it can.
It can change.
Okay.
There's Links, there's Urban League, there's Jack and Jill, there's all kinds of organizations, and they don't know we exist.
Okay, well, they might. Now,
For those of us in the business who then try to include y'all in our pieces, and we can't get you to cooperate.
Sounds personal.
now I don't know what that is about. But we'll talk to you about that later. Yes.
My name is Lisa Curitan, and I'm the on-air fundraising producer for Channel 2.
Did you hear? I didn't hear all you said.
I'm sorry. Lisa Curitan, on-air fundraising producer for Channel 2, WGBH.
Thank you.
And my question has to do with also being on the inside. Producers that are at the station, producers that I know at the business, we feel very isolated when we try to reach out to the community to bring people in, to be, for an example, I call personally, and it's not my job to do so, which is the case with blacks all the time, we always go the extra mile, to call an organization in to be volunteers on air for our fundraiser that takes place 3 times a year. I asked for 20 volunteers, I think, from a very prominent black organization in Boston, and I think I got about 7. When we call for any other organization, mostly white within the station, we usually get 100% turnout, and we really need the support from the outside. And the reason why programs like Martin is able to exist is because black producers don't feel that the marketplace is out there. And how would you think that we can create the marketplace?
How could they not think the marketplace out there when we've had Cosby in a different world? There are other shows that show that there is a clear marketplace for positive programming. I don't understand that.
No, well, I mean, for instance, the producers that are on the inside have
I'm sorry.
What I'm asking you and the panel here is then take what is out there that is positive and somehow either come through the producers that are on the inside, getting in contact with the producers, because we are there. We are not getting the support on the inside. If it's letter writing, if we call you for information, if we call you to show up at an event, to be there. For shows like Martin and I hate to keep harping on shows like Martin, to continue to exist, shows white producers that, well, hey, there's a market out there for it, and as a result, there was a number of copycats of Martin, and you didn't see a number of copycats of Cosby.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Do you have a question? Could I appreciate very much the statements, but we do want to have your questions.
I do have a question and a comment. My name is Deborah Sharif, and I'm a film student, and I just want to mention I'm on a grad level because I agree with the panelists and what they say, and I cared so much that as a mother, an activist, and a grandmother right now, I decided to go back to film school because I am angry at the images of African American women. I'm angry. And I also wanted to share the fact that the institutions, now the institution that I'm going to right now is just designed from the point of view of a white director, and that's a problem. And I feel almost if I wasn't an older student, if I was around 22 or 25, I would probably suffocate. So what I'm saying is we need to look at the institutions and how they're educating the filmmakers, and because I'm older, I'm going to solicit you now. I'm going to be out there making my feature. And again, it's real important that we have support from the community, and it is a big problem. So look at the institutions. Aside from talking about letters, we also need to be a watchdog for the institutions and how they educate us, because I feel alone. I'm the only African-American woman in the program, and there's very few sisters that are studying filmmaking. And I wish I had some more, and if there's any after this program.
Here, look for this lady after this meeting.
But thanks for coming, the panelists. You all are great. Good to hear.
You know, what I'm hearing a lot of is that the filmmakers or the producers don't feel support from the community, and the community doesn't feel as supported as they would like to feel. People get that feeling? That somehow we are here and we all have similar concerns, but we haven't been able to get together. So I hope this may be a beginning. Yes.
Hi, I'm Dale Guillaume, and I'm a grad student here at Harvard, as well as a television journalist. I would like the panel to address this. I'm somewhat perplexed about this Oprah Winfrey issue. I hear one side said that she's presenting a positive image. Another side says she's presenting this mammy role and she's overweight, and she comforts her audience and so forth. So if the panel can address that, I would appreciate it.
Okay, certainly. I think she has a right to be overweight myself.
I would like to say, first of all, that we have a habit of, and I'm saying we in terms of a black audience now, is that either we like something or we don't like it, okay? So it's like we love it, and when Oprah Winfrey came on, we were very excited because we didn't have someone on the air to represent some of our issues, okay? Oprah Winfrey, before she came, we have to remember some of the positive things. First of all, that before Oprah Winfrey came on the air, the other talk shows rarely dealt with black issues or black people. After Oprah Winfrey came on the air and presented black people, the rest of the talk show hosts realized that they had an audience. So they took the audiences. So in order for Oprah Winfrey to stay on the air, yes, she has to be diverse. Which brings me to the next point, is that instead of us giving our people both, we give them the ecstasy, as I say, and then eventually they get the backlash because it's the only thing that's happening. Instead of us doing that, we need to demand that there are more Oprah Winfreys on the air, or maybe not more Oprah Winfreys, but more diversity in terms of the types of black shows that we are getting. And if we have a problem with Oprah Winfrey's weight, that's our problem. That is not her problem. Because once again, I am advocating diversity. And we can look around this very room and realize that black women come in all sizes, shapes, colors, hairstyles, all right? And so we have to learn to accept, and I keep saying we as black people, we have to learn to accept the beauty in that diversity. Okay, white people are not doing that.
Thanks. My name is Mecca Nelson. I'm a Harvard graduate working in development, and I'm about halfway completed on my first screenplay, and I say first because there will be more. As I was watching the video, I thought that it was interesting that it closed with a song by En Vogue that in itself is very liberating, but if you look at the artist who perform it, it's very interesting that these images are so pervasive that even when we're trying to get a critical look, that the construct is still framed by such an image, because we all know that they were created, produced by men in an overly sexual image. So I just thought that was interesting. Now, to go into my question, I studied African American studies when I was here, and it's interesting that the fronts in which we have to prove our humanity have shifted from the Harlem Renaissance, when we had to write, or we had to sculpt, or we had to paint. Now the front has switched to the visual media. And a couple questions I'd like to leave with you regarding that is, what do we neglect by focusing so much time and energy on the media? A look at Harlem today will show you that something was lacking in our approaches when we confined it to focusing on literature and the arts as means of proving our civilization. Another question I have is the issue of appropriation, and how can we embrace those images that were so painful but yet are a part of our history, whether we like it or not. I worked on the recently published Black Women's Encyclopedia, and in there's Hattie Mcdaniel, there's Dorothy Dandridge. I mean, we disagree perhaps with their images, but how do we embrace them into our culture? How do we empower ourselves by reclaiming them? And the final question I'd like to leave with you is just to, sorry, it's just to think about media being a mass market. And how do we, where do these questions fit into a medium that deals with the mass consumer market? Does it have a place? Do people really care about images? I mean, often when I was here, I wondered if I was living in a vacuum, if that, when I go home, people love good times, people love what's happening, and how do we balance those two things? Thanks.
Take your pick.
Does anybody would like to respond to one of those questions?
I'll take a short stab at the last one. I think what we're all saying that there should be a diversity of offerings. We don't all have to dislike everything that's out there, but those of us who are here because we're worried about images should do our thing and try to improve images. And hopefully we can bring others along when we work on that.
Okay.
And I would just like to make one slight correction since you referenced the Harlem Renaissance and the shift from images. On the contrary, that's incorrect because the Harlem Renaissance was on several fronts, and one of the fronts was 1921 production of the U.B. Blake Shuffle Along. Shuffle Along changed the images for theater from that time on. We may not like those images, but they were improved images from what they had before. All right, so we need to recognize that it was on more than one front, and also that the Harlem Renaissance did not only occur in Harlem. Okay, so there were events going on throughout this entire country, and it included all of the various arts. Okay?
Thank you. Yes. Could I just make one? Could you ask a question?
Yes, I have a question.
And could you just ask one question?
Yes.
Thank you.
We learn as we go along. Okay. My name is Beverly Smith. As an educator, I have a question. When the images were on the screen, I could not help but notice that color went with certain images. And so I'd like to raise the question of what is the implication of that and how does that impact how we still respond to one another.
We have some work to do among ourselves, is all I have to say. I'm not an expert, so that's my contribution. I think you should take it.
Right. Color is the subject that we do not want to talk about out loud. We haven't yet confronted that, and it's something that we are ashamed of. We need to recognize that until we confront that and can really see beauty in every type of African American woman and really feel it, we can't change those images because we haven't done the work we need to do on our own selves, and that is a job that we have to do for ourselves.
Yes.
My name is Maya DiGiorgio, and I'm a comedian. Oh, good, I got a laugh already. And the one thing that I'm trying to bring up is everybody keeps pointing at Martin because that's the show on TV. The problem today, because African Americans have a new power in the media on their own, and it's controlled by men, and men don't have their ears open. Because as a female comedian, despite looking as light as I look, every female comedian that walks onto the stage, they will not open their ears to just by them walking on the stage. And right now, as a comedian, it's a walkthrough to get a TV show similar to Martin, because Def Jam is so open to comedians right now. If men will open their ears, we can get some power. What is a way that we can get men, African American men, to open their ears? Because they're the ones who put Martin on TV, not the white community.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I think we have greater influence than we acknowledge when it comes to African American men. We can influence them, we can persuade them, we can make them, if it comes to that. There are more women than men. There are more African American women than there are African American men. Let's do it.
All right. Please.
Also, as I said earlier, that we have to cease being victims. We have to really stop throwing our hands up in the air and saying there's nothing we can do about it. Because we spend a lot of money in this country. Maybe we need to figure out where our dollars are going and maybe pull them back into our neighborhoods and put them into these endeavors that we feel that we need.
I just have to say that I cannot believe that if African American women stopped looking at Martin and said that it was not funny, and wrote letters, that Martin wouldn't go off the air. And Shanae. Yes.
They're one on the side.
Shanae is in Living Color. Jeannie, it's that side. Yes.
My name is Leslie Butler Barron, and I teach dance in a high school, in Charlestown High School. And because I am with young people every day, I'm very aware of their language and am confronting in various ways the one word that when I was a child, if it was spoken, meant that you fought. And to hear our young people refer to each other, well, the nigger did this, and the nigger did that, and the nigger did so-and-so. I have heard that when a word is used a particular way over and over, it changes in its meaning, and it evolves to something else. And I'm still stuck. Okay. Where the meaning was when I was a child, and I'd like somebody to address either, yes, it's changing, yes, it's a good thing, no, it's not, we ought to put tape over their mouths or do something to address this new usage of the word. And surprisingly enough, white students don't use it. They have enough sense not to use it.
Well, I think that, again, these words are part of what comes to be the expectation of how you behave. Sometimes, or very often, they have heard them at home. And again, this is part of the way that the response to oppression, to what has happened to black people. And on some levels, the use, for example, the use of the word nigger. I used to think that it has now become a word of, well, it's all, sometimes even endearment, you know. People have used it that way because with our backs against the wall, if you're gonna keep on calling me a nigger, and I can't stop you from calling me a nigger, then I will change the meaning of the word, and that way I can have some influence. But I think it's something more than that. It's that, but it's something more too. It now, in school where it's not supposed to be used, and it's well known that it's not acceptable, that has to be seen as defiance and oppositional behavior, which is one way that we find we have used ever since slavery times to get a sense of power if we felt we didn't have. We break the hold, or we do something to feel that we were asserting ourselves. But we don't see that when we do these things, they're reacting. We're reacting to, and it's from the victim stance. It's not from I'm taking charge, I'm making a choice, I'm functioning as a responsible person.
Thank you. Thank you. We have time for 2 more questions. I know this is a live group. This is a wonderful audience. But we have a keynote speaker who's come from New York, and she's going to be just as wonderful. So we want to leave time for her. Jeannie.
My name is Jeannie Taylor. I'm a psychologist. I'd like to direct my question to Dr. Pinderhughes. The current term in psychology and human behavior today and in political world is empowerment. The question that I have, and not that you're going to give me a direct answer, I think the question is to all of us, is that empowerment basically means self-sufficiency. If anyone studies history, and I think we all should because it affects who we are today, the history is that we will not be empowered in the white media. We won't. And I think it's rather ridiculous for us to continue to sit and expect different images to be made of us by people who basically are oppressing us. The question for me, I mean, it's just 1, 2, 3. The question for me is that you could look at Lady Sings the Blues that was just beat out of the Academy Awards. You look at what they did to Malcolm X this year. Everybody had the TV probably turned on to that show, and we should have basically boycotted it. The question is that Spike Lee stated in an article about a month ago that when he ran out of money, he said, I'm going to make this movie. And he went to several of the most powerful black people in America, Bill Cosby being one, Oprah being one, Michael Jordan being one, and they produced his movie. And he stated that I should have did this a long time ago. And I guess my question is why do we continue to look for people to do things for us when in fact we have an audience, we have many millionaires, black millionaires in this country. Why aren't we producing and doing things for ourselves?
Well, I think we still don't believe that we can do it. There are not enough of us. And it's a simple answer to that question. You wanted to say something?
Oh, first of all, I don't think that I've been saying that we want these other people to do these things, and I need to.
I don't think I said you did.
Okay, no, you said we, and I was speaking to we.
General.
But let me address two things. First of all, you brought up Spike Lee. Spike Lee is one of the people who's appropriated some of these negative images of black women. First of all,
and there's no question to that. But Malcolm X wasn't. Malcolm X wasn't.
And we had an example. Okay, last year we had an example of an alternative imagery produced by Julie Dash in Daughters of the Dust. Excellent film, and I hesitate to ask how many people in this audience went to see that film, okay? Okay, I'm very pleased to see that number, but that's the point that I'm making. In order for, again, when we talk about supply and demand, if every one of us goes to see, yes, and it is a distribution, Ms. Lewis, thank you. Distribution could be another whole program, okay, the discussion of distribution. But the point that I am making is that if each of us went to the theater and saw a black film, okay, that would help that film to live. The other problem is we allow, as we sit here, as you said, we watch the Academy Awards. At the same time, we allow the media to tell us that there's only Spike Lee out there doing black films. And that does two things. That puts a burden on Spike Lee so that he has to be the only one and cannot grow in his craft. And at the same time, it keeps other people out of the mainstream movie theaters. So again, as black people, we have to address all of those things. You know, even if we just go to the film because a black person did it, we don't have to like it, and we can say we don't like it, but at least support it.
Thank you.
I'd like to add one thing. I really don't think we can afford to relinquish the institutions that exist, the media institutions that exist, just because we can't control them yet. I don't think that we have made the proper attempt to use the power that we have. We have to recognize that we have it and do something with it. People are going to continue to watch mass media programs even if they shouldn't. We have to acknowledge that and try to control the images of us that are shown in those programs and on those mediums. Same thing with news organizations and with news product. We are going to be in the news. We're going to be in those shows. People are going to read the newspapers, hopefully, and watch those television shows, so we need to continue to try to control the images of us portrayed in them.
Thank you. Yes, wait, you know, yes, ma'am. I had my timekeeper said this is the last question. I'm sorry. Is that Sarah Ann back there? I'm sorry, Sarah Ann. They're going to kill me if I don't. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Robert Wilkerson, and I'm a recent graduate of Boston University, and I studied art history there, and I have an interest in the media as an art form, and I wanted to know if anyone on the panel could speak about images of black females in children's programs or movies for children, you know, such as Disney things, and you know, PBS type things.
Good question.
They're absent. We're not in those children's programs by and large, I believe. I can't remember unless Aladdin.
We're not.
All right, then as far as I can recall, we're not in those programs for children. the absence is dangerous because our children are going to see them also. You would probably know more.
Interesting.
You would probably
I
know
think we
children's
should, you should applaud yourselves. This has been a wonderful. Our audience is as interesting as our panelists. Thank you. I want to move on because you have to meet our keynote speaker. Stephanie Stokes Oliver is the editor of Essence magazine. She is responsible for the day-to-day editorial management of this publication, including the supervision of editorial staff, development of story ideas into article assignments, and working with contributing writers. Working closely with the editor-in-chief, she also sets editorial policy, procedures, and makes long-range plans. Stephanie Stokes Oliver lives in Montclair, New Jersey with her husband, Reginald Oliver, and their daughter, Anique. Stephanie.
Hello, Boston. Is this the one? This is the one that's working, huh? How are you? This is quite some affair here. Y'all are hot. I tell you. I really want to commend Ann Ashmore Hudson, Brenda Brathwaite for putting this on. That video was just fantastic, and I would like to give them all a hand. The program committee, everybody, all the Boston links. I think it's great that they're addressing this important issue of establishing our rightful place in popular culture, and we can see that it's a hot topic, our images, because look how many of y'all are here. Well, I didn't even see you all up there. Good, hey. Wow, this is quite some, they need to do more things like this around the country, particularly in New York. New Yorkers? Okay. It says to me, I think this whole thing is saying to me that we are just not going to be dissed when it comes to the media and our images, and particularly black women. I had, of course, prepared remarks, but then after seeing and hearing, there are other things I kind of want to say to you, and one is that you probably should know, after so much talk about Amos and Andy, that Essence magazine was started with the name Sapphire first. Can you believe that? Believe that? I mean, men started Essence. What can we say? Men started Essence, 5 black men, and they thought that meant that they named it that because they said it was a precious stone, and that their women were precious gems in their lives. And the women editors came in and said, we ain't having that. No, we changing that name. So somehow, some black woman thought of the name Essence. And that is the name that endures to this day. And the brothers had to say, all right, y'all know better than we do what the name should be. I want to say that this affair has made national headlines, at least in my family. My parents live in Seattle. I'm originally from Seattle. And I usually, Seattle people here? I usually inform them about my speaking engagements and say where I'm going. And I don't think that my mother was paying attention when I said I was coming to Boston in the middle of saying Indiana and Delaware and other places. And it happens that she is one of the charter members of the Seattle Links, and that she is now on the executive board over protocol. Well, I won't, she's very proper, so the over protocol is a really good place for her. Very,
That's
you know.
our generation.
That's, yeah, well, I don't know if that's true, but I know that she is very concerned about, you know, the right way to do things and how things should be done. So her friend, the national president, Marion Sutherland, made her the head of protocol. And it happened that she was at Marion Sutherland's home and got the invitation for this event. Somehow the Links here gave the national president, let her know what was going on. And she saw the invitation, and then she called me during the week. I knew something was up when she called me during the week. We usually only talk on Sundays. And she said, you're going to be keynoting at the Boston Links affair. And I said, yeah, remember I told you that. And she said, well, I guess you did, but I just saw the invitation, and I saw your name. And it wasn't until she saw it in print that it made any effect on her. And so this made me think that seeing things in print affects all of us. And it seems more compelling, more real when we see it in a magazine, when we see it in a newspaper, when we see it, what if she'd seen my name on TV that I was going to be here, or on the radio. And that is why what the media says or what it does is so important. Recently, a friend of our family's happened to have been in Essence in the March issue. Her name is Dorothy Pittman-Hughes. She's a business owner in Harlem. And she shared with me that people had come around with their magazine, people that didn't know her, that lived in the community, to have her autograph her picture because they saw her in the magazine. And she's just amazed that now people have been dropping by saying, you know, I saw you in the Essence. But it's amazed me, they always say the Essence, rather than I saw you in Essence. I saw you in the Essence. And these are people that she didn't know. And so it's the power of the media that we all are impressed by. Our children believe television before they believe us. If your child's looking at the Wonder Years and that little boy is dating at 13 and they're 13 and they're not dating, they think something's wrong. And I know I didn't see myself in any little cute little black girls like the girl on the Cosby Show. They didn't have that when I was coming up. So at least our children are seeing themselves in some positive ways. The video mentioned that black folks are the ones that look at television the most, but a study came across my desk by Nielsen that said that it's not just black folks, but specifically black women. Black women watch more TV than white men, white women, white children, black men, or black children. And we don't know, of course the study did not say why that is, but there are some statistics that Essence has had floating around that support these statistics. And one is that the most read magazine of black women is TV Guide. TV Guide. More than Essence. Essence has a circulation of 950,000. And there are some magazines that have more black women reading them because, for example, we found out from Ladies Home Journal they have like 10 million readers. If 10% of those are black women, that's more than even our readership. So we are reading other people's stuff. We're not just reading Ebony Jet and Essence, and TV Guide is the #1 magazine that we're reading. And also, when Essence put Kadeem Hardison and Jasmine Guy on the cover together, it was one of our best-selling issues. And it set a record that was not supplanted until Oprah Winfrey, another television personality, was on the cover. There are some good things happening on TV. I know I was homesick one day and turned on, and on The Young and Restless, a black woman and a black man got married. I tell you, you know, I was really, I was trying not to watch, you know, trying to not to act like I was looking at the soaps when I was home, but I was taken into, because too often they have a token black character on the soap, and it's the only black character. She doesn't even have a friend, much less a meaningful black relationship. So I was very impressed that the folks got married. Although I have to say, it was a little interesting to me. They got married in the home of these white folks, these rich white folks. I said, how many of us got married in any home of any white people? I just didn't know any. I'd never been to any black weddings at any white folks' house myself. So even though they let us get married, you know, they still had to be in there putting on the wedding. There are some other positive things happening. Robert De Niro is producing a new high-quality show called Tribeca. And I just think, I saw the first episode, I thought it was just excellent with Larry Fishburne. I didn't see the next one. Did any of you see?
Yes. Yeah.
Was it good?
Yeah, not as good.
Not as good because it wasn't about black folks? Okay. Well, I know that Joe Morton, remember him as the brother from the other planet. I love that title, the brother from another planet, is going to be a recurring star on Tribeca. And black women are making breakthroughs in filmmaking, as we've discussed here, Daughters of the Dust director Julie Dash, and Dry White Season director Uzan Palsy. And now they're being joined by newcomers Leslie Harris, whose movie, Not Just Another Girl, no, Just Another Girl, on the IRT is opening today around the country. Ruby Oliver, no relationship to me or my husband, also has a movie called Love Your Mama. So we know that's a black film, right, from the title. And Maynell Thomas, who was a former Playboy bunny turned entertainment lawyer, turned filmmaker. It has a soon-to-be-released film called Who's the Man that she's producing with Suzanne DePass, and she credits Bill Cosby as helping giving her a start because he hired her he was performing evidently at the Playboy Club and would see her reading her law books, and he thought that was such a, what an image there. Speaking of images of black women, that is how she evidently paid to go to law school, by being a Playboy bunny and all those tips she got. And he told her that when she finished school, to call him up and maybe he could help her out, and sure enough, he gave her a job as his attorney. So he helped launch her. And you can read about her. As a matter of fact, I have to do my commercial here. In the May issue of Essence, we have a little story about Maynell. This is the next issue with Janet Jackson on the cover, talking about her role in Poetic Justice, the next movie out by John Singleton. And that's going to be out very soon. Unfortunately, though, for every step forward, there's a couple of steps back. And we are thinking about, we're kind of doing research on a story about blacks and racism in Hollywood. And we've been coming back sharing stories that we've found in the field. And Susan Taylor, our editor-in-chief, came back from LA one trip and said that she heard that there was a specific sitcom, she didn't tell us the name of it, in which they were talking about a black storyline, and one of the black writers said, well, maybe we need some more black writers on the show. What do you think? And his suggestion was met with silence. And then he said, well, why don't we vote on it then? And that some white writers booed the guy. And the two black writers were so insulted that they walked out. So this is the kind of thing, though it's unfortunate that they have to face this, in the day-to-day of trying to do the right thing behind the scenes. On the set of Martin, our favorite whipping boy of the moment here, we heard that two young writers had gone through an intensive writers training program to write for the show. And they were placed, it was Universal or whoever the parent company is, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it is, but they had a training program, and they placed these young people on the show, and their first suggestion was that they decorate the walls. Remember how the Cosby Show was with black art on the walls and all? And that was their first suggestion, and that was their last suggestion. They got fired. They got fired, and the reason was that they were too Afrocentric. And so now that is like the 90s code word for too uppity. Now the jury's not out on Martin yet, but entertainment, well, I guess some jury's out, evidently. Well, at least we know the Shanae jury's out. But Entertainment Weekly, and we saw in the video there was a magazine clip about blacks and buffoons that featured Martin, but even the white media has gotten gist of this controversy in our community, and Entertainment Weekly, just a couple weeks ago, March 26th, did a piece on it, and I just want to read you just a little bit of what they said about it. While disproving souls like Bill Cosby continue to believe that African Americans must act with a deliberate show of dignity to command respect, Martin Lawrence insists that blacks don't have to put on any sort of act anymore, even an act of dignity. He feels free to giggle, to speak any way he likes, to be as wacky as he wants. And then the article goes on to point out this great scene that shows how wonderful Martin is. Anguished over the breakup with his girlfriend Gina, but too proud to beg, Martin sat in the dark, singing along to the Shylights' great heartbreaking oldie, Have You Seen Her? Here was emotionalism and romance from an African-American man, qualities that television almost never depicts. How could Bill Cosby possibly disapprove? Well, whether you disapprove or not, my message to you this evening is that you do have the power to make your opinions heard and ultimately to change the media. And we liked Bill Cosby, and he had a successful run. We liked A Different World, and I read in Betty's publication, USA Today, that in an article that was about getting money for college, that one girl said, I went to college because I saw A Different World, and I liked it, and I thought it looked fun, so I tried to go. I didn't know it was going to be so hard to get this money to go. But I went because A Different World. We liked the book Waiting to Exhale, and the book publishing media said that we don't read, and we're the ones that have kept it on the bestseller list. I have to tell you now, though, that since they know that, the publisher of her book in paperback is refusing to advertise in Essence because they said they already got black women readers. Now they want to get other readers, so write them. We got to get our bottom line so we can keep Essence publishing. We need that little money from her publishing house. So we can make a difference, and I'm going to give you, as in, of course, magazine style, I've got to be true to being a magazine editor, 10 ways that you can make a difference with the media. Number one, the most obvious, is to complain. And I have given out to you, in some of your seats you might have seen a little list here that I cut out from my own local paper that has television stations, addresses and phone numbers. And unfortunately, the first ones are the local New York ones, but you can use this format to come up with your own in the Boston area. We have one editor at work that loves to complain, and she's into writing letters. She'll write anybody a letter, and she comes in and shares the letters, and we all laugh about what she does. And she's gotten to be quite a letter writer, and she's been in the newspaper and all kinds of things. And when we want to complain now, we tell her to write for us. But she says we should write our own letters, as all of us really should. But some of us don't like to write letters, so we have another editor who, our executive editor, Valerie Wilson-Wesley, who is into leaving messages on the viewer complaint lines of these shows. And she said the other day she didn't like something that Stone Phillips on the Today Show said, and she called and left a long message, was late for work. So he said something that made me mad, too, now that I just want to share quickly. He was interviewing Dolly Parton, and he said to her, how did you feel about Whitney Houston recording your song? And she said, oh, great. Did some of you see that? So mad. She said, oh, great, it was very nice. And he kept trying to get her to say that it was a negative thing, that she had stolen the song from Dolly, and that, that surely it had to be something that Dolly wouldn't have liked, that Whitney Houston has recorded this song. And Dolly kept trying to say, it's cool, we talk, I like her, she likes me, and plus she's making a lot of money off that record. So Stone, if I didn't think I would have been late for work, I would have called Stone myself. And I really still need to follow up on those feelings that I have. And as Sister Friedberg said, it's a well-known formula in television that one letter equals 1,000. They really think that your opinion represents what 1,000 people think. So if 1,000 of us write, then they'll think all black people feel like that. So, we got to remember that formula. The not so obvious thing may be to compliment media. They need to know when you're pleased, because to tell the truth, white folks in power often don't have a clue as to what we like and what we don't like. So we have to let them know. And since I would also like to mention that we hope that you will compliment the Essence Awards show, another commercial here, which is going to come on May 29th on CBS at 9 o'clock. And Thanks. We are, as you know, as most of you probably know, celebrating the achievements of black women. And we want to let CBS know that this is a show that you think is important and that should stay on the air every year. And I'm telling you, it's a struggle to sell them every year. So this will be our second year, and we hope we can keep it up. I think we should also support alternative media. One day, on a Sunday, I usually watch, my husband and I, maybe many of you do, have a ritual of watching 60 Minutes. You know, if you were at a family barbecue or anything, or out, you always back in time at 7 o'clock for 60 Minutes. And one evening, we live in New Jersey, and it's about a 20, 30-minute drive from New York. We decided to come in to Harlem because we'd heard that there was going to be a film festival, and they were going to be playing The Murder of Fred Hampton. And it's real hard for me to get out of, Montclair to come back into the city after working, all week in the city. But it was well worth it. We went, and we were only going to see that one documentary, and we ended up staying for 4 hours to see how the FBI infiltrated the Panthers. And these documentaries were just incredible. And whoever put them all together, those small filmmakers need to be supported. We can form a media watch, an advocacy group. The Boston Link's own Deborah Prothro-Stith, who I'm sorry couldn't make it from, she's in Boston, stuck in, because of the weather here, the plane couldn't come in or whatever. I wanted to meet her because she suggested in TV Guide last summer that we need to make a concerted national effort to make violence on TV and in videos unpopular, as we did with smoking and drinking and drunk driving. So that's a good way, I think an excellent suggestion to do a campaign that makes violence on television and other things that we don't like about media a priority. Emma Bowen in New York had a watch group that constantly complained to networks, and she did it so much that eventually they called her in to discuss her views with top brass. They just wanted to know who this little black woman was that kept writing and complaining. And she had a media watch group that got a lot of attention from the National Association of Black Journalists. We can encourage our children, is what my notes say, but after the sister that said she went back to film school, I should say, and ourselves, to enter the entertainment field and to make a difference. As they say in the lottery in New York, you got to be in it to win it, and you got to be in the ball game to play it. I was in the hairdressers this morning and looking at EM magazine, and Rock, Charles Dutton was on the cover, and he said, it said that on the NAACP awards, or the Image Awards, that he got up to make an impromptu speech to say that the problem is that there are very few, if any, black heads of studios. So although we have been represented as entertainers and artists, we haven't been in the decision-making part of the entertainment industry. And we still have a lot of achievements to be made there. We can make a difference there. You can buy a radio station. Kathy Hughes in Washington, D.C. owns a station there, and she employs 110 people, and I want you to know that's more than work at Essence Communications. So that you can do that. You can buy a TV station. Claire McLaughlin, who went to Howard University with me, was the first black woman to own a network-affiliated TV station. She owns KLMG in Longview, Texas, and it's a CBS affiliate. You can take advantage of public access channels on cable. You could have a Rock and Roxbury show, or the Boston Links Weekly. The FCC demands that the cable stations offer public access, and we can take advantage of them. We can give individual financial support to positive programs. Just Another Girl on the IRT was started with what I call a sister budget. Leslie Harris only had $150 at first of her own money when she started talking about the film and going to film festivals. And evidently, writer Terry McMillan heard about her problems in getting the film made, and she called her and told her that she would contribute money that actually did help to get the film made. Now, all of us don't have the $2.6 million that Terry got for her book advance, but we may be able to match Leslie's $150. We can raise money for things like that. Collectively, our charity groups, we can give to the United Negro College Fund and to the college fund of a gifted student who wants to go to NYU Film School or Northwestern's magazine program. We can provide venture capital for people with a solid business plan for media. I remember when I was growing up, my father put in some money to start a jazz station in Seattle, and it was going to be called K-Jazz. And it did start, and it got off the ground, but unfortunately there was the people who he was giving the money to were not experienced in having this kind of, in a radio station. They'd never had one before, evidently, or something happened, and something shady happened, and it didn't get off the ground. But they rallied again and got with some new people, and then another jazz station started. So Seattle does have a jazz station because black folks in the community came together. Lastly, we can support each other with good vibes. And I was talking about Oprah Winfrey. She had an article that she had ghostwritten for us. Somebody, helped her, and she had an article in our magazine. And she started it by saying that she was walking down the street one day, and after she had lost all that weight, and a sister came up to her that she did not know and said, "You gonna gain that weight back, you and Luther, just wait," and walked off. Now, Oprah has feelings, Oprah has feelings too, and this is somebody that watches her on TV, and probably if anybody, white was getting on the show, that'd be the first woman to be saying, "Leave Oprah alone," but, she had something to say about that, so we need to support each other more with good vibes every time we counter each other. And I like to tell the story that Marian Wright Edelman wrote in an article at Essence about the media image of Fannie Lou Hamer. She writes, I was watching former President Johnson's inaugural ball on television when Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, that great lady of Mississippi's civil rights movement, who lacked a college degree but certainly not intelligence or clear purpose, came onto the screen. I was watching with the college president's wife of a Mississippi college, and she moaned, "Oh my, there's Miss Hamer at the president's ball, and she doesn't even have on a long dress." My response, Marion says, to that was, "That's all right. Mrs. Hamer with no long gown is there, and you and I with our long gowns in the closet are not." I love that one. So her moral was, do not confuse style with meaning. My message is, please be kind to each other. Y'all are cold. Be cold when you want to. Sister's gonna be cold. We have the power to make a change, and groups like this one, the Links, and other club groups like Ida B. Wells' Club Women can make a difference. And groups like the Links can because they have the L, the leadership qualities to take initiative and make a positive change, like with that video. I, the interest and the ideas to do so. N, the networks and necessary connections to blacks and whites in power. K, the knowledge and know-how to do it. S, the sensitivity, the savvy, and most importantly, the sisterhood. So I would like to leave you with a poem that a Latina sister sent me. Latina women would like to start a magazine like Essence, because if you think of it, there's no magazine for them. And they say they've been reading Essence, and they don't see themselves in other magazines, and so look out, maybe you'll see a magazine called Latina soon. But she sent me this poem, and the name is by Akua Omosupi, which sounds like an African name. And the name of the poem is, "In magazines, I found the specimen of the beautiful. Once I looked for myself between the covers of 17, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, among the blue eyes, blonde hair, white skin, thin bodies. This is beauty. I hated this shroud of blackness that makes me invisible, a negative print, some other one's nightmare. In a storefront window, against a backdrop, I saw a queenly head of nappy hair and met this chiseled face, wide, wondering eyes, honey-colored bronze skin, a mouth with thick lips, bowed, painted red, smiled, purple gums and shiny pearls. I turned to leave, but this body of curvaceous hips, strong thighs, broad ass, long legs, called me back to look again at the likenesses of African queens, Dahomey warriors, statuesque goddesses. I stand outside those covers, meet face to face myself. I am the beautiful. And so are you. Thank you.
Stephanie, as this evening's co-chair, Brenda and I, on behalf of the Boston chapter of Lynx, want to recognize the work of Essence magazine. To do so, we borrow from Alex Haley his motto, "Find the good and praise it." It implies that the good isn't always easy to see. Sometimes you even have to search for it, but it is worth looking for, and when you find it, honor it. It is with this concept in mind that we choose to recognize Essence magazine tonight. And it is in the spirit of the teamwork at Essence that we particularly recognize the work of not one, but two of its editors, Susan Taylor, editor-in-chief, and Audrey Edwards, editor-at-large. When we speak of diversity, we can speak of Essence. It does not pretend that to be sisters in spirit, we must all look alike or have the same experiences. Its articles and photo layouts reflect the diversity that is found among African American women. It identifies, celebrates, and builds upon our strengths. It is therefore with great pleasure that we acknowledge the commitment and hard work of this unique magazine, its editors, and staff.
On behalf of Susan Taylor and Audrey Edwards, who was my predecessor in the job of editor at Essence, we'd like to thank you all very much, and we're so happy that you all are reading us. Thanks.
On behalf of the Boston chapter of Lynx, I'd like to thank you for joining us in our exploration of and discussion about images of African American women on screen. As parents, educators, and concerned community persons, we have no more important job today than raising healthy, competent, and spiritually whole children who have a vision of the possibilities of their lives, a vision that dispels the stereotypes they see on television, in the movies, music videos, or the media in general. One of the goals of this forum was to heighten awareness of these images. A second goal for us is to help our children to develop critical viewing and listening skills. As a next step, members of the Boston Lynx will be developing a study guide over the summer to accompany the video. It will be made available to parents, teachers, community and youth organizations, and any persons interested in the welfare of our children. If you are interested in getting more information about the video and study guide, please fill out the insert in your program and give it to one of the Lynx. Most of us, I think, are wearing our name tags. A limited number of videos and an event poster are available for sale this evening at a nominal cost. The video is $10 and the posters are $2. In closing, I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Stephanie Stokes-Oliver, our respondents, Elizabeth Hadley-Freiberg, Elaine Pinderhughes, and Betty Ann Williams for their cogent and thoughtful remarks. Heather Campion, the forum director, and her assistant, Marissa, for their assistance here at the Kennedy School with all the logistics and for helping to make this evening possible. We would also like to acknowledge the excellent work of Karen Holmes, who helped us to produce the video. Karen is over here. And finally, to you, the audience, for your attendance and interest in this forum and for all your wonderful questions. Thank you and good night.
There she is.
Thanks, Deborah.
I heard it was wonderful.
Okay, the posters. If I could have your attention, please. The posters and videos are on sale over here to my right.
I need the whole thing again. Thank you so much. I heard excellent things out in the galleries, in the video room. Excellent things. You guys did a wonderful job. Didn't I do a great job coming up and shaking? I'd like to meet